The Arctic Council has for the first time agreed on a 10-year strategic plan. Ministers gathering in Reykjavik on Thursday emphasized their commitment to fighting global heating, which is happening 3 times faster in the far north. But they're very much at odds over military action in the Arctic region. As Sibel Karkus reports, tensions have been rising as Russia, among others, beefs up its military presence there.
In the Arctic, the climate isn't the only thing that's heating up. Arctic Council members are sparring over territory as Russia and its rivals fortify their military bases and investments there.
It is important to extend the positive relations that we have within the Arctic Council to encompass the military sphere as well, first and foremost by revitalizing dialogue on military issues.
Global heating is opening new shipping lanes in the region and thus unlocking the vast potential of its fishing and mineral resources, including a projected 90 billion barrels of oil. With more than 50% of the world's Arctic coastline, receding ice in the Arctic Ocean is set to offer Russia the sea lion's share of the Northern Sea route to export oil and gas abroad. With its own fleet in the region, it's been preparing to compete with Canada, Denmark, Norway and the US. But Washington is upping its northern forces as well, with 54 new F-35A Lightning II jets set to go to Ireland Air Force Base, Alaska by December. The US has also sent B-1 bombers to boost NATO defenses, adding to Russia's suspicion over NATO's motives on its doorstep.
We have questions for our neighbors like Norway, who are trying to justify the need for NATO to come into the Arctic.
Last week, the US joined NATO countries in condemning military expansion and aggression by Russia on several fronts, including in Arctic waters. While US Secretary Antony Blinken has warned of retaliation, he also emphasized the need for peace in the region.
The Arctic, as a region for strategic competition, has seized the world's attention. But the Arctic is more than a strategically or economically significant region. It's home to our people. Its hallmark has been and must remain peaceful cooperation.
Another challenge to NATO claims China's interests in the region. Despite having no Arctic coastline, China has billions of dollars invested there in its 2018 Arctic Policy White Paper. As glaciers continue to melt, the rival nations are finding themselves with new waters in common, which could set the old Cold War foes on a collision course. Sibel Karkus, TRT World.
Let's get more from Ingrid Medby, who is a senior lecturer in political geography at Oxford Brookes University. She joins us from Durham in the UK. Welcome to the show. Now, we've seen the Council has approved its first ever 10-year plan. Lavrov has laid out a list of 100 tasks that he hopes to accomplish. Clearly a sense of newfound urgency here, perhaps, but what do you think are the most pressing issues that need to be addressed?
I think the most pressing issue is, of course, climate change or global heating. All of the other issues that are discussed and are in the 10-year strategic plan as well have to do with the changes that are taking place in the Arctic. As you mentioned at the start, it is heating at 3 times the average global pace. It is dramatic. It is impacting lives and livelihoods as well as ecosystems, animals, and so on. So that's the kind of overarching topic to all of this, I think. Then I think if we were to summarize the key most pressing issues, I think we would have to look at the current goal for also Russia's chairmanship, which is sustainable development. What does that mean for people living there? How do we, for example, square social development with economic development? What does it mean for the environment as well?
Now, most of the countries here stand to benefit from global heating, ironically. I mean, it's going to open up more shipping lanes, rather it is opening up more shipping lanes, granting them easier access to these hydrocarbon reserves. So can they be trusted to do right by the rest of us?
Yeah, I don't know if it's really true that they are set to just benefit. I think all of the Arctic countries, the 8 countries that have territory or oceanic spaces north of the Arctic Circle, they're also the ones that are most affected. As mentioned, climate change is happening there more rapidly than elsewhere, and of course that is being felt by people living there, not least the indigenous peoples who live in the Arctic. And I think all of these states and their leaders are very aware of that. So yes, there might be economic opportunities, and I think often those are the ones we hear about in international media, but also there are a lot of challenges, and they relate also to economic activities. There's the high risk that come with operating in very hazardous environments, as well as the challenges of, again, climate change to existing infrastructures, existing housing, for example, hospital provisions, search and rescue. Imagine if something were to happen in those really quite kind of dramatic waterscapes that we see images of here. You know, it's very difficult then to send a search and rescue vessel. So yes, the Arctic states might benefit from some things, but they're also the ones bearing the brunt of these changes, and I think they're very conscious of that. So quite often, actually, what we hear is not that they present themselves as benefiting from this, but rather the opposite, that the leaders of the 8 Arctic countries, they present themselves as being the ones who have a particular responsibility and are more concerned that countries that might be far south of the Arctic Circle and therefore don't see these dramatic changes, that they might operate in a less responsible manner. But I think this is actually an area of global concern. So hopefully that means that people and populations both in the Arctic itself, but also south of it, can appreciate the unique environments that we are dealing with here.
And that's perhaps why we're seeing cooperation between the US and Russia. But we also see China is vying for more control in the region. Do you see that as destabilizing this balance that we've achieved so far?
Not necessarily. I don't think China is vying for any kind of power, but they certainly have interest in the region, as all countries do, as the globe does. China, as others, will be impacted by climate change, and we can see that happening most rapidly in the north. So they have an interest in conducting science, learning more about what is currently happening and also what is yet to come, but also economic interests. So, for example, you showed the map earlier of the potential sea routes. So it might potentially offer a shorter sea route from China to Europe or even to America. So that's something that they have an interest in exploring. And so far, China has been very deliberate in how they've spoken about their role as a near Arctic state, but working with the 8 Arctic states and also the indigenous peoples groups. So there are 6 indigenous peoples organizations in the Arctic Council, and they also have a say on these matters, whereas China is an observer to the council. And so far, that's their role, is mainly to observe the decisions being made among the people of the Arctic. So in terms of stabilizing or destabilizing a balance, in some ways we could think of China and other non-Arctic states' interests as providing an extra motivation for the Arctic states to work together. So for example, Russia and the US, which have met here on the sidelines of the Arctic Council Ministerial to discuss a matter of things, it provides an opportunity to actually find that shared ground and say, here's an area that we have shared interests in. We all have a concern for the environment, for the climate here, and we all have a really strong wish to maintain international law.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but perhaps shared fears and hopes could help bring everyone together on at least this issue.